But only a certain group can be racist. All right? A black person cannot be a racist. Racism is a power relationship between groups of people. That's all it is. It means that one group of people have control of so much wealth and power and resources that it can deprive, hurt, and injure and exploit another group to benefit itself. Never, say never. Never. Dr. Anderson goes on to say, never in the history of the earth have black folk ever controlled that much resources where they have gone out of their way to exploit, injure, and do something to whites. So therefore, racism only started in the 16th century. Black people must learn how to compete and survive, or not compete and perish. The system is stacked against you. And if we don't pull together, we're going to be in the dugout, not out on the playing field. We're going to be on the bench, not on the court shooting baskets. And that's how you subjugate a people, is keep them divided. And they have done a masterful job. Now listen, again, black people must learn how to compete and survive. Now, see, we're not talking about being against anybody. That's where everybody gets scared when you start talking about it. It's amazing, every other culture group can come together and everybody thinks it's nice. But when black people try to get together, all of a sudden there's something wrong with that. See, that's a part of the mentality and the mindset to keep us divided so that we're fragmented and don't have strength. See, if you take a string, wrap it around your hand, just a little small string, and take the other string, the other end of it, and wrap it around your hand, and hold it like this and go, you can break that string. But you put 500 of them strings together, you will never break them.
I would like to say to this gentleman and all other people who are not blessed with melanin at this point in time to understand that what has happened in our history is that you have been misinformed as much as we have been misinformed. Much of the information that is brought forth not only from Dr. Muhammad but other areas, other scholars are not available to you, as the sister said, in your curriculums that you have for 400 years when you did not allow us to read and write and was being hidden. Whether you, sir, personally did that or not, it was a legacy that was passed on to you. And I end by saying the Holocaust is simply the greatest atrocity on film. Ours was not film.
Hello, what's up, good people? Welcome back to the channel, and I hope you are doing great from wherever you're watching this video. As usual, welcome back to the channel once again, and if it is your first time across this channel, welcome as well and feel at home. Now, we have an interesting video right here today, and in this very particular video, we're going to learn a lot from it, but I'm much more interested in some numbers. So today we're going to play with numbers, and you know that numbers hardly ever lie. Now we're going to draw some statistical comparisons and contrasts that will lay bare for you at the end of this video how much white supremacy has really deprived you and I as black people vital information that really tell you the truth. Now I want to share this with you today as a black person watching this video, or even a white person that is interested in the truth. If you still rely on mainstream media as a main source of your information, then I could say I'm sorry for you, because I pity you, because it's awashed with white supremacy lie. It is a proxy of white supremacy. And if you really want the truth, I would urge you today and every other day, you have to dig deep. You have to work hard, go down the rabbit hole, because it is in there, in the sources that are not put in the open, that true information really lies. And information is power, and we have to seek power. If at all, we have to empower ourselves as Black people. I don't want to waste so much of our time because we have an interesting video that I want you to listen and learn. And at the end of this video, I'm going to play with some numbers. I'm going to share with you some surprising numbers on that will really expose white supremacy bare and clear. So without wasting much of your time, let's jump right into this video, and I'll see you on the other side of this video.
We're talking about racism. Dr. Claude Anderson, who is Black and the author of the celebrated book Black Labor, White Wealth, in a public meeting held here in the Crenshaw Christian Center Faith Dome, said almost the identical thing that Mr. Keinville said. That was the one that we quoted last time, in reference to racism. Dr. Anderson, speaking to a mostly Black audience, said, and I quote, I want you to understand that you are in a very highly competitive situation. You're going to be competing to survive and prosper. And that's what racism is all about. Contrary to what anybody tells you, and I just saw a definition of racism in the Washington Post just last week, who is a noted columnist, who is a conservative. And what he was really talking about was prejudice and discrimination. Racial prejudice is about color, and anybody can be prejudiced, but only a certain group can be racist. All right, a Black person cannot be a racist. Racism is a power relationship between groups of people. That's all it is. It means that one group of people have control of so much wealth and power and resources that it can deprive, hurt, and injure and exploit another group to benefit itself. Never, say never. Never. Dr. Anderson goes on to say, never in the history of the earth have Black folk ever controlled that much resources where they have gone out of their way to exploit, injure, and do something to whites. So therefore, racism only started in the 16th century. Racism, we're not talking about racial prejudice now. You got to keep those two things separated. Okay? When they began to commercialize slavery against Blacks, that's when racism started. There was no such thing as racism before that. The other thing you need to know about racism is racism comes from the word race, R-A-C-E. Race means group. So whenever you hear people talking about you cannot prove racism because someone fires you from a job, they are absolutely right. And the power structure and all the white think tanks in Washington know that. That's why you can no longer prove racism. Because racism, hear this well, racism does not apply to an individual. It applies to a group. Because I discriminate against you, that's individual. That's personal. It's not group-based. And so you can no longer prove group-based discrimination. The second thing about the word race, which is very important, is that the word race means being in competition. Race means being where people are competing from here to there. And we're in competition. That's what racism means. Black people must learn how to compete and survive, or not compete and perish. The system is stacked against you. And if we don't pull together, we're going to be in the dugout, not out on the playing field. We're going to be on the bench, not on the court shooting baskets. And that's how you subjugate a people, is keep them divided. and they have done a masterful job. Now listen, again, black people must learn how to compete and survive. Now, see, we're not talking about being against anybody. That's where everybody gets scared when you start talking about it. It's amazing, every other culture group can come together and everybody thinks it's nice. But when black people try to get together, all of a sudden there's something wrong with that. See, that's a part of the mentality and the mindset to keep us divided so that we're fragmented and don't have strength. See, if you take a string, wrap it around your hand, just a little small string, and take the other string, the other end of it, and wrap it around your hand, and hold it like this and go, pew, you can break that string. But you put 500 of them strings together, you will never break them. All right? Now, in my humble opinion, and that's the end of the quote. Let me read that again. Black people must learn how to compete and survive or not compete and perish. End of quote. In my humble opinion, these statements by Mr. Keivel and Dr. Anderson say all there is to say about the definition of racism as practiced here in the United States. In other words, these two men have given us the technical definition of racism. However, in this segment of our teaching, my purpose is to talk about racial prejudice, which traditionally has been interpreted as racism. That's what the average person thinks when he hears the word racism. He thinks racial prejudice. In a book entitled All God's Children, author Stephen L. McKenzie, associate professor of Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, Rhodes College, Memphis, Tennessee, copyright 1997 by Stephen L. McKenzie, on page 122, makes this illuminating statement, and I quote, "Despite the progress of the civil rights movement in the 1960s and the following decades, racism is still very much an issue in this country. Racial integration, which has crept into schools, businesses, and other institutions in America, tragically has made little headway in the churches." Fannie Lou Hamer's observation about Sunday morning church service being the most segregated hour in America is as true today as it was 20 years ago. End of quote. From the same book mentioned earlier, author Paul Keivel on page 121 says, from 1619, now I don't know, I have to read this, but do you have have you ever been on a commercial airliner and right in the little pocket in front of you, they have little plastic bags in case you get air sick? Do y'all have any plastic bags with you today? Because what I'm getting ready to share with you now may tend to cause air sickness to come upon you. But I hope you'll be able to maintain yourself. From the same book mentioned earlier, author Paul Keivel on page 121 says, and I quote, from 1619 until slavery ended officially in 1865, 10 to 15 million Africans were brought here to America, and another 30 to 35 million died in transport. A journey called the Middle Passage. In all, 40, conservatively speaking, 40 to 50 million Africans were abducted or killed by our white American and European foreparents, end of quote. Now, we just quoted a white man, not an angry black revolutionary. We just quoted from the book of a white man. Caucasian? Caucasoid? white, 40 to 50 million were abducted or killed by our white American and European foreparents. End of quote. That's awesome, to say the least. We get upset and righteously indignant, and rightly so, when we think about Adolf Hitler and the annihilation of 6 million Jews during World War II, which was without question a tragedy. But who gets righteously indignant and upset about 50 million black Africans who were abducted or killed by the forefathers of this nation? If you ever go to Israel on a regular commercial tour of Israel, the first place that they take you to is the Holocaust Museum. And it is a sick feeling that you get in your innards when you walk through that museum and see the photographs of what one group of men did to another group of men for no other reason than they were who they were, as though they had anything to do about who they were. Where be the Holocaust Museum over 50 million black Africans? Well, I forgot they don't count, they're just animals anyway, so forget them. Oh yeah, that's the attitude. Forget them. People want to get upset. I start talking about this and people get upset. You don't get upset with the Jews for having the Holocaust Museum. And I agree with him. I think they ought to have it. Thank God they have it. And hopefully enough people with enough brains will go there and see that mess and never be tempted to do that or let that happen again to any group of people. But what about the black Africans? Don't go there. Don't go there. I am. Don't go there. I ain't gonna say no more about that. What does he mean? Not for you. Don't worry about it. Now listen to this. In the same book, on page 121 and 122, Mr. Kaivo gives us an interesting view of one of our most cherished heroes, Abraham Lincoln. I always thought that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves because of a heartfelt desire to do what was right in the sight of God concerning one man enslaving another man. In other words, rectifying man's inhumanity to man. According to Mr. Kaivo, perhaps I have been wrong. What do you think? I quote, "The Civil War was a complicated political, economic, and social event. And while slavery was a key issue, the abolition of slavery was not a strong concern of the American public." As Lincoln wrote in a letter to Horace Greeley, a journalist and political leader and contemporary of Lincoln, added, "Dear sir, I have not meant to leave anyone in doubt." This is Abraham Lincoln, okay? "Dear sir, I have not meant to leave anyone in doubt. My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union, and is not either to save or destroy slavery." They didn't teach you this. If I could, listen, this is Lincoln talking. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could do it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because it helps to save the Union. End of quote. And people, you wonder why we have problems. See, this thinking, this pattern of thinking, it has been passed on from father to son, family to family. See, people don't talk about it out in the open, but they talk about it behind closed doors, and they have these attitudinal ideas about black people. That's why this thing has continued to go as long as it has. And the church is the most guilty group on planet Earth in fostering this kind of thinking. That's an eye-opening statement, just what Lincoln just said, isn't it? On page 122, Mr. Kuyvel makes an insightful statement that is sure to anger some. I quote, "The second problem with moving on from slavery is that we rarely acknowledge the long-lasting effects of more than 200 years of slavery. Although slavery was officially abolished by the 13th Amendment in 1865, economic and cultural exploitation, everyday violence, including lynching, rape, physical attack, and other forms of mob violence, political disenfranchisement, and also total segregation in the South and the North continued into recent times. We have had over 350 years of economic and cultural enrichment of the white community at the expense of African Americans. The effects of that exploitation are in the present." End of quote. Now, there's one last statement that I would like to quote from Mr. Kuyvel that I think puts the icing on the cake of this issue of racism in America. On page 110, he says, and I quote, "We cannot build trust and an honest commitment to creating equality in this country if we are denying the injustices of the past. Our good faith efforts to change the system will not be taken seriously if we continue to deny or distort the record of white racism." End of quote. That's awful, but it's awesome. I hope you're hearing me. America has a lot that it must answer for. I don't want you to get the idea that white racism is peculiar to the United States. It is worldwide. For instance, we have all heard of apartheid in South Africa, but we need to realize that most of our information about it is from the media, which is controlled by the white power structure. I think it will be of interest for our present study to hear from some Africans themselves who have had to live under the South African brand of racism. In a book entitled "The Church and Racism, a Black South African Perspective" by, again, I apologize if I don't pronounce these words because I don't know what, let me spell it, Zolile. Zolile, M-B-A-L-I. Zolile, M-B-A-L-I. Copyright by the same person, 1987. Published by SCM Press Limited, London, England. The author points up the same general facts about racism that we have already seen in our study. On page 11, the author states, and I quote, "So the economic reason for apartheid can be seen as cheap labor." America can relate to that because it be the past master of cheap labor. This nation's wealth was built on the back of cheap labor Cheap meaning nothing. But let me quote the author again. So the economic, and I'm quoting, so the economic reason for apartheid can be seen as cheap labor. The existence of cheap labor sustains the high standard of living of the whites. And this is an African, wrote a book in South Africa about South Africa. But you know that the devil has a MasterCard too. You know, he flies from one country to the other, so you know he's not just limited to one country. It sounds like America, don't you think? He further states on page 15, and I quote, "The World Council of Churches' concern over racism goes back to the General Assembly held at Uppsala in 1968. Section 4 of the Uppsala report reads, A, in parentheses, racism is linked with economic and political exploitation." End of quote. Doesn't that sound just like what we read from Mr. Kuyvel and Paul Anderson, Dr. Claude Anderson? See, it's the same thing. See, racism is economic. We are back at the same point that Mr. Kuyvel and Dr. Anderson pointed out to us. Racism is, as I said, economical and political exploitation. Whether America or South Africa, it's the same old garbage. Mr. MBALI goes on to say on page 18, under heading B, rationale for an ecumenical program to combat racism. That's the subtitle. Okay? Page 18, under B, rationale for an ecumenical program to combat racism. Under numeral 2, we have sadly to recognize that in spite of the battle that has been fought against racism by the churches, mission agencies, and councils of churches, with often heroic personal sacrifice, racism is now a worse menace than ever. We have also sadly to confess that churches have participated in racial discrimination. Many religious institutions of the white northern world have benefited from racially exploitive economic systems. Many church members are unaware of the facts of racism and of the involvement of their religious and secular institution in its perpetuation. Lacking information about institutionalized racism and about the possibility of developing sophisticated strategies to secure racial justice, Christians often engage in irrelevant and timid efforts to improve race relations. Too little and too late. End of quote. Now, I want you to get the enormity of this, because this statement was made in 1969. Now, I want to refer to one more statement that Mr. MBALI makes that I think every American and every person who styles himself a Christian should think about very seriously. I think that the future of our nation and the church rests upon the recognition of the truth revealed in this statement. On page 17, Mr. MBALI states, under Roman numeral 2, recommendation regarding an ecumenical program to combat racism, under numeral 1, and I'm quoting, since its inception, the World Council of Churches has consistently denounced the sin of racism. You didn't get that? Oh, you missed a good time to shout. You missed that. Listen, since its inception, the World Council of Churches has consistently denounced the sin of racism. The World Council is saying that racism is a sin. And if it's sin, it should be repented of. And repentance means stop doing it. That's one reason why our nation is going through the hell it's going through. This nation has never repented. I said the nation has never repented. Listen now. Since its inception, the WCC, World Council of Churches, has consistently denounced the sin of racism. That's the bottom line issue. Racism, called by any other name, is still a sin. And sin must be dealt with. The question must be asked, how did or what allowed America to get into the position of being racist or color prejudiced against black people? How'd that happen? How'd that start? Where did it come from? We know that slavery was and is an economic proposition. But what conditions prevailed that allowed WASP, so-called Christian men and women, to condone racism and racial prejudice? And if you don't know what the WASPs are, W-A-S-P, I'll tell you. White Anglo-Saxon Protestants. I didn't coin the word. This is a word I picked up in my research. That's how they refer to themselves. White Anglo-Saxon Protestants. We need to look at that question. How so-called Christian men and women could condone racism and racial prejudice. We need to look at this very carefully so that we can see how to reverse the situation. We definitely have some monstrous racial problems both in secular America and in the Church of the Lord Jesus Christ. What could enter the minds of intelligent, rational, thinking people that would cause them to mistreat a whole race of people who had never done anything negative to them, to treat them in a way in which they themselves would not want to be treated? The cause, the big lie, black people are inferior. This has been taught in the schools, in the homes, and in the history of this nation. The lie must be corrected. Some people will deny this assertion and will attempt to defend themselves. They will become angry with me and threaten to stop watching the program or financially stop supporting the program. All I can say is do what you have to do, because I must do what I have to do. And notice, I didn't say all. So if you're not guilty, you don't have to get upset. If you're not a part of the problem, then you must be a part of the solution. Jesus said it this way. See, there is no middle ground. There is no neutrality. Jesus said it this way. Real simple, cut to the chase. Jesus said, if you're not for me, you are against me. That's it. It's that simple. That's how he interprets it. You may say, well, I'm not for and I'm not against Jesus. I'm neutral. He says, if you're not for him, you are against him. And I say, if you're not for me, you are against me. Let's look at some historical documentation to see if there is any validity to what I have said in regards to the lie about the inferiority of the black man. If we do not know what causes our thinking patterns about other people, we can never make any corrective adjustments. Before we get into the historical documentation, I feel it necessary to address the possible criticism that may be leveled at me from some African Americans concerning why would I bring up racism, racial prejudice, slavery, and all of the other unpleasant things of the past. Actually, that is a very legitimate question. And frankly, I really don't mind being asked. From a book entitled The Journey of the Songhay People, copyright 1987 by Calvin R. Robinson, Redmond Battle, and Edward W. Robinson Jr., the authors answer this question for me in a way that leaves little room for debate. Why would I bring this up? Why would we talk about all this stuff? Why plumb the depths of the past? This book, I don't even have to answer the question. They answer it for me. On page 21 of this book, The Journey of the Songhay People, they state, and I quote, "Oh, you got to get this. If you don't get this, then you're not interested in blacks. If you're a black person and you don't get this, you're not interested in yourself. And if you're a white person and you don't get this, you're not interested in us." Now get this. I quote, "Knowledge of race history is to the race exactly as an individual's memory is to that individual." Let me drop that on you again, because that's heavy. That this deep. We going deep now. You got to get this though. You got to get this. Listen to this, because I know that this thing just went to the air today, and when the rest of it gets to the air, people are gonna. I know what black folks gonna do. The field folk. They're gonna be upset with me. They're gonna denounce me. They're gonna talk to me. Now you watch it. Your friends and relatives, they'll do the same thing. Oh, the house. Yeah, that's the house. I'm sorry. No, the field folk, they're the good folk. Yeah, we the field folk. Hey, field folk. I'm sorry. I meant the house folks. You know them house people? They're gonna jump all over me about this. But here, get this now. Quote, "Knowledge of race history is to the race exactly as an individual's memory is to that individual. The masses of African Americans suffer from partial cultural amnesia because of a certain deliberate program which wiped the slates of our memories clean of true African events prior to the cotton fields of America." But the monsters who perpetrated this cultural genocide were not satisfied. After wiping the memory slate clean, they wrote upon those slates a series of vicious lies. They wrote on the slates, on the minds of all, black and white alike, that the African is really an ape which can speak. They wrote on the slates of the minds of all that the African evolved in the heartland of the jungles of Africa, where not even the faintest glimmer of light of science and learning could penetrate. They wrote on those slates that this African subhuman has neither the genetic ability to learn nor the ability to behave properly. They programmed all of this upon the minds of all, black and white alike, end of quote. I agree with this because the history of this nation bears it out. On page 23 and 24 of the same book, they ask an important question and answer it superbly. Why study modern history or any history at all? Two of the greatest benefits that can be derived from the knowledge of history is not only the receiving of a better understanding of the present, but more importantly, that knowledge of history will provide the information with which to shape the future. Place yourself in the position of a successful businessman who, as a result of an accident, has a sudden loss of your memory. You would not know where your office is, nor how to get there. You would not know what successes you had achieved, what you are supposed to do today, nor how to plan for future successes. For all of your knowledge and experience would be entirely lost. You would have to start all over again. You would not know the reasons for your present situation. You could not call on experience and knowledge to plan for a successful future. If your business rival stole your records, they could tell you all kinds of falsehood. They could reduce you to an impoverished, blubbering idiot. That condition is called amnesia. Amnesia is not just limited to individuals. A whole race can have amnesia. It is a truism that history is to the human race what memory is to the individual. Now, that's awesome. But how true? Cicero, first century Roman writer, statesman, and orator said, and I quote, this is awesome. Listen to this. There is very little that is more important for any people to know than their history, culture, traditions, and language. For without such knowledge, one stands naked and defenseless before the world. End of quote. We don't know where we came from. All of our names are white names, taken from the slave masters. We don't know what our ancestors called us. They wiped the slates clean. That's why we've been defensive, because we don't know self. We don't know where we came from. Someone else has well said, and I quote, "He who does not understand the past is doomed to repeat it." End of quote. These statements sum up in a nutshell my reasons for bringing up the past. Moving right along. Let's examine some documentation that sheds more light on how this inferiority of the black man lie got started. Oh, this is in a book entitled Infected Christianity by Alan Davies, copyright 1988 by McGill Queen's University Press, page 13, the author states, and I quote, "The philosopher David Hume, who happened to be an 18th century Scottish historian and philosopher, the philosopher David Hume had this to say about the black man, and I quote, "I am apt to suspect the Negroes, and in general all the other species of men, for there are 4 or 5 different kinds, to be naturally inferior to the whites. There never was a civilized nation of any other complexion than white, nor even any individual eminent either in action or speculation. No ingenious manufacturers amongst them, no arts, no sciences." End of quote. And I mean, I can understand how he could come up with that. I mean, I could see that. I mean, how in the world, I mean, you know, ignorant black folk couldn't have done anything but build pyramids. I mean, that's, you know, you know, apes. Yeah, they built the pyramids. And modern science, they still don't know how them folk built them to this day. They still can't figure out how they got them stones up on top. These are people that don't have no science. But these are the kinds of attitudes that have been promulgated down through time. And some of you got these attitudes in you now. You know it, and I know it, and God knows it. And you need to be cleansed. You need to be washed. And I need to quit because I am out of time. We walk by faith, not by sight.
Hello and welcome back, and I hope you have enjoyed this video, but most importantly, I hope we have learned something from this video. So much to learn from this video, and some of the obvious takeaways from this video is, and I have said this before, is we black people are not racist, and we can evidently say black people are not racist, and there is nothing like counter-racism. Counter-racism, what they sometimes want to call counter-racism, is simply a reaction to an action. So you mistreat me and I react, and that cannot qualify as racism from my side. It is just a reaction of your mistreatment to me. Now, from this video, we have learned something about racism, the definition of racism as a power relationship between groups of people, power relationship between two groups of people, in which one group of people has so much power and wealth that they use the power to hurt, deprive, and exploit another group of people for their own benefit. And therefore, we as black people from the continent of Africa and from outside the continent of Africa have never been in that position in which we hoarded so much power that we used it to exploit another category of people. Something that's said and done. Now, what I wanted us to focus that much in this video, and as I had mentioned earlier, is I want us to play with some numbers, some really let's say surprising numbers. So the difference between this video is basically between the difference between racism and prejudice. So a comparative historical atrocities check between black people and the Holocaust. Now, all of us know about the Holocaust, and the reason is because it is given prominence, it is talked about, and it was an atrocity. And why we cannot justify it, but we have questions. Why is it given the prominence than atrocities that were committed to black people from the continent of Africa all the way outside? And let's play with some numbers, because numbers don't lie. So the Holocaust, 1941 to 1945, those are 4 years, and the numbers are, we have 6 million approximately unalived Jews. It's widely taught in schools and broadcasted in the media globally. There is a lot of information about the same in the media. Again, there are memorials, there are museums, and reparations, most importantly. And there are also never again campaigns being, across the globe. There is ongoing political protection against Holocaust denial. In as far as the United States of America, there is even federal funding. And there is even, I just learned, there is even a committee that is responsible for the remembrance of the Holocaust in the United States of America, miles and miles away from where that atrocity was committed. So keep it in mind. 6 million Jews. Now, let's talk about the transatlantic slave trade. That was around the 1500s to 1800s when it was abolished. So an estimated enslaved Africans was roughly up to, and I'm giving the conservative figures, 12 million. 12 million against 6 million. But I'm not yet done. Unalived during raids and mid passage. So we have 2 to 2.5 million that those are black people that we lost during the mid passage, and then we have 5 to 10 million that we lost during a captivity and raids. So 2 to 2.5 million during the mid passage, let's say in the Atlantic Ocean. But during raids and captivity, we lost about up to 10 million of them, of our brothers and sisters. So that brings us to totals of 15 to 20 million in the list during a period of 350 years of slave trade. 350 years of slave trade. Remember, the Holocaust was for 4 years and it was roughly 6 million Jews. Here we have up to 20 million and we have 350 years. Now, it's taught shallowly in schools as a fact, just a mere fact, rather than what it exactly is, which is a humanitarian catastrophe. But I guess most of us watching this video didn't even know those numbers that we lost cumulatively during the transatlantic slave trade, up to 20 million Africans during the raids, during captivity, and the mid passage. 20 million. But who talks about that? Where are the museums and the monuments? They're not there. Okay, few monuments, zero reparations, and black suffering is often minimized and depersonalized. Now, that's not enough. I want us to talk about the European colonization of Africa. What happened shortly after the slave trade? Now, they came fully because the business venture of slave trade dwindled, was not profitable anymore. Now they decided to come to the continent to loot the resources right from the source. Now, and that happened between the 1800s to 1960s when different African states started gaining their independence. Now, I would love us to start with the Congo Free State under King Leopold II of Belgium. And it is an estimated 10 to 15 million black people were lost in that time. 10 to 15 million Africans. Let's talk about the Herero and the Namak genocide committed by Germany in southwestern Africa. And there's estimates of up to between 80,000 to 100,000 Africans were lost during that time. In Kenya, my country, we had the Mau Mau uprising. This atrocity was committed by the British, and 90,000 to 120 detained and tortured. And today we even don't know in my country where some of the graves are. Now let's also talk about the Algerian War of Independence. Up at least 1 million Algerians, not Algerians, let's say Africans, because that time it was just Africa. We did not have Algeria exactly. And we have up to 1 million black people were lost in that struggle. Who talks about that? Did you even know about the Algerian War of Independence? Did you know that there was a war that costed this continent of black people up to 1 million people during that time, between the 1800s to the 1960s? Now, I do not want, before I forget, I want also to highlight that in the neighboring Tanzania, and that is East Africa, we had the Maji Maji Rebellion, the Maji Maji Uprising, in which it is usually estimated that 100,000 to 300,000 people were also lost through violence and starvation. I think this was also committed by the Germans. Now, those numbers so far, the numbers I have just mentioned for you, have, are tenfold the number of the people that were lost during the Holocaust. However, in as much as we cannot justify and say those should have been lost, but where is the fairness? Those other people get reparations, get recognition, and all of that. But black people, nobody talks about that. Why? Because we don't control the means. And that is why I was saying, you and I as a black person, if you still rely on mainstream media, on your conventional sources of information, then you're lagging behind. Seriously. We need to wake up as a black people. And Dr. Frederick Price has just said, we either come together as a unit, or we and fight for ourselves, or we all perish together. So this is a call for all of us to rally behind ourselves and talk about it ourselves. See, nobody else thinks about us. So if we don't think about ourselves, nobody will. And we will just be forgotten eventually, and will just be part of history, or history itself will be erased because they have done that. Yeah. So I wanted us to just lay bare white supremacy using figures and what we can relate to today. There's a lot more that was in this video, and I'll be back with a different perspective on the same video. I hope you have learned a lot. And if you have something you would like to share, go down to the comment section, leave me a comment, and give this video a thumbs up. Kindly share this video so we can reach as many black people as possible. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel, I definitely request you to hit the subscribe button to be part of this community. And until next time, I would definitely love to see you in the next video. Peace out, and one love, black people.